Hi sweet friends, welcome back to another video and a special hello if you are new. My name is Casey. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my top books of 2025. I have 10 books here and I had the hardest time narrowing down my list this year. I had like a pretty strong, I would say like top 7, but then those kind of outlier books, I had the hardest time narrowing those down, and then I thought, well, I'll just make a top 15, but then it was hard to narrow those down, and then that could have endlessly spiraled into a top 20, or talking about every book that I read last year, and I read 56, so I feel like we would have been here for a while. These aren't ranked, so they're literally just going to be in the order that I pulled them off of my lap. I wanted to organize them by the order that I read the books in, but it's heavy and there's just no way to structure my stack in a way that it wouldn't topple off. But anyway, let's get to the books. Right on top, I have Devotions by Mary Oliver. This is a collection of Mary Oliver's poetry. It starts off with her most recent poems and then goes back in time to her earlier published poems. I love Mary Oliver. I've been a fan of her for quite a few years, and I've read a collection of her essays, which I really enjoyed. But this collection of poems was absolutely life-changing. I just felt that I tapped into my whimsy. I feel like I have a new appreciation of nature and a new appreciation of the tiny details in life and how magical that is, like the inner workings of an anthill, these tiny insects, and how important they are to the system, and the veins within leaves, and how individual each blade of grass is. Like I feel like I have such a newfound appreciation, and all of that was brought to awareness from the reading of this poem, or this poetry collection rather. I think Mary Oliver is everybody's poet. I think she's extremely approachable. I think if you don't like poetry, I think that you would enjoy Mary Oliver. I think if you're afraid of poetry, I think that you should try Mary Oliver. I just think she's just incredible with the way that she is able to write in such a heartfelt and relatable way. Her poems are beautiful, and I'm sad that I finished this book. I started it at the beginning of 2024, so it took me about 2 years almost to work all the way through it, and it's definitely a collection of poems I believe that I will come back to over and over again within my lifetime because they're absolutely stunning. I feel like we're getting nonfiction out of the way because the next book is also nonfiction, and it is Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This is about the history and development of tuberculosis, but it also reads part memoir because John Green talks about his experiences of meeting someone who has tuberculosis and how that impacted his life. I found this book incredibly eye-opening. I wasn't aware that tuberculosis is a disease that nobody should be dying of. It's very treatable and people can live with it and be cured from it. But because of things like pharmaceutical greed, that doesn't happen, which was incredibly frustrating and upsetting to read about. I also found, if it talks about, like I said, the history of tuberculosis. So if you think back to the romantics and the poets and how tuberculosis was romanticized as this disease that only the most pure and the most heartfelt can have, and now that it's seen as something to be associated with poverty and dirtiness, I thought that was really interesting. I just feel like it really hones in to so many flaws within our systems and how greed is preventing so many people from living a healthy and full life. But despite it kind of honing in on those heavier things, I found this book incredibly heartfelt, incredibly hopeful, and honestly just life-changing. I've been a fan of John Green since I was in middle school. I will read pretty much anything that he publishes, probably for the rest of my life, but I think this is a must-read for everybody. Next, I have Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. This is the third book in the Rome, Kentucky series. I loved this book so much. All of these books are loosely based off of Audrey Hepburn films, and this is based off of How to Steal a Million. If you've seen How to Steal a Million, the closet scene in it and the closet scene in this book are just perfection. Like, Sarah Adams did an amazing job, but it tells the story of Emily and Jack. They were academic rivals turned workplace rivals, and Emily wants to be a romance writer, so she wrote this romance manuscript, and a little spicy romance manuscript, I should add. And one night she's kind of wine drunk and she decides to take the plunge and send it to a publisher, except she accidentally sends her kind of steamy manuscript to her principal. So she has to recruit Jack to help her break into the principal's home while he is gone on vacation, log into his computer, and delete the email and delete her manuscript. This book was just so fun. I feel like nobody does cute. I'm talking like cute in all capital letters with sparkles and glitter and stars and hearts around it better than Sarah Adams. I just think that she just does it so well. The slow burn is really perfect. And Emily is a very like type A, eldest daughter kind of character. And so to have her have Jack come into her life and to be someone who she can let her guard down, who she can be vulnerable with, who she can rely on, was a really beautiful thing to see. Next, I have The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Brontë. I read this book in January of last year, so I don't remember it as vividly as some of the others here in my lap, but this tells a story of a young woman who has moved into a neighborhood and moved specifically into Wildfell Hall. This is told between letters and journals, and it talks about as she moves in, everyone's very curious about her, but as they get to know her, they start to become really skeptical of a young woman or a young widow living on her own with her son. A young man in the town has become enamored with her and kind of just wants to get to the bottom of what is going on. And she gives him her journal so he can kind of get to know her and to kind of get to know the situation behind her life. And I just found this book incredibly feministic for the time that it was written in. It was a wild ride. Like when you pick up classic literature, which I feel like if you've read any of the Brontes, you shouldn't be surprised, but with what they come up with. But it was just wild, and I feel like Anne is so wrongly overshadowed by her sisters. I feel like this is just as good as Wuthering Heights. This is just as good as Jane Eyre. It really deals with the cycle of abuse, and women can be very powerless when dealing with abuse in today's time, but also especially in these times, and how stuck women were. And it was really interesting to have this character try to change her fate for her and her child. I also read that during the publication of this, when it was being republished, one of the Bronte sisters tried to stop this book from being published because she worried that it would ruin, it was so scandalous that it would ruin her sister's reputation. This book is just really a wild ride for a classic and really thought-provoking. It's one that I have thought back to off and on all year. Next, I have Hament by Maggie O'Farrell. If I had to pick just one book as my favorite, I think that this might be it, tied with another book on my lap. This tells the story of Shakespeare's wife Agnes and the loss of their child Hamlet. So names are pretty interchangeable there. So we've often heard Shakespeare's wife referred to as Anne, but she was also very interchangeable with Agnes, which is the name that she goes with here. Hamlet was also very interchangeable with Hamlet. So we know that Shakespeare and Agnes's son dies. We don't exactly know why, but Maggie O'Farrell took her own kind of historical fiction twist on it and decided that he would die from the plague. So this is essentially a mother's journey of grief with the loss of her son, and how this grief also led to the making of the play Hamlet. This book is beautiful. It's so soft, so subtle, and it's just incredibly human, incredibly heartfelt. I feel like I just can't describe in words how beautiful the prose is here and how beautiful the story is and the way the story flows in together. I'm dying to see the film. I haven't got to see it yet. When it came in theater, it only came near me for a couple days and I just wasn't able to go see it, and then it was out, and I've just been so that like just anxious for it to come out on streaming because I want to see it so bad. I just think that is one of the films, like I don't know, I haven't seen it, so I might be completely wrong. So if you've seen it, let me know. But I feel like it's one of those adaptations that are going to be just as good as the book. I don't know, but it's just this book is magnificent. I feel like if you read it, it will stay with you for the rest of your life. And I definitely want to read some more from Maggie O'Farrell in the upcoming year. Next, I have Dead Man Blues by S.T. House, which is a pen name for Silas House. Silas House is a regionally local author to me, and I've gotten to meet him a few times. So I'm just drawn in with his work and how well it kind of represents the culture that I grew up in. But Dead Man Blues is a mystery thriller. I wouldn't say that it's a cozy mystery, but I also wouldn't say that it's overly graphic, or if you don't, I don't like things like that. So if you're not into that, I definitely don't think that that should deter you from reading this book. Um, it tells the story of kind of a disgraced mayor within a town, and he kind of got drunk and crashed his car because he found out his wife was having an affair with his best friend, who was chief of police. So he's kind of isolated himself. He lives on a houseboat out on this lake, and there is a murder that takes place close to where he lives, and he is recruited by his ex-best friend to try to help solve this kind of stream of crimes. The book is set in the 1950s, and I felt that for when it was set, it had a lot of really wonderful representation. I feel like Silas House did a really great job of making sure to include that representation, despite the time that it was set in. I found the mystery incredibly gripping. I never knew what was going to happen until the end, and by then I was just like squirming, like wanting everyone to be safe and to be okay. It was very thrilling for me. This also deals with the formation of lakes in communities. I live in a community where a lake is formed, and a lake was formed, and it brings in a lot of tourism. And I had never really given thought to how the lake ended up there. I just think I had just assumed that it had been there forever, but they hadn't. A lot of really wonderful giant lakes that we get to enjoy recreationally were man-made, and there were homes and villages and cemeteries and memories there, and people were forced out on their land for the creation of these lakes. So it deals heavily with that, which was just a really interesting perspective and really thought-provoking because it was something I had never really thought of before. Next, I have My Friends by Fredik Backman. I love Fredik Backman, and this was probably one of my most anticipated releases of the year. This tells the story of a young girl named Louisa. She's about to age out of foster care, and she has just inherited this really beautiful painting, this like multi-million-dollar painting that she's kind of been obsessed with her entire life. Moving from foster homes and not having a home herself, she found a lot of comfort within this painting and kind of decided that these small group of kids sitting on a pier overlooking this like ocean or lake were her friends, and she's journeying back to meet the now adults from this time. So it's a dual timeline. It has Louisa's present day, and then it has kind of the summer that the painting was made with the young children and kind of their last like coming of age summer together. This book is just everything you love about Fredik Backman. It was beautiful, it was heartfelt, wonderful characters, full of whimsy and really great humor to balance out those heavier moments. I will say when I first started this book, I thought that it was going to be so heavy and so sad the entire time, but I feel like it balances out. So if you do go to start this book and you get like 50 pages in and you think, oh my gosh, this is the saddest thing I've ever heard of, I can't finish this, keep going because I promise it's worth it, and it does have mostly a happily ever after. I just loved this book. It just, like I said, it just really honed in on why I love Fredik Backman and will quite literally read anything that he publishes. Next, I have a memoir, and it is The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. Kelly Bishop is who plays Emily Gilmore on Gilmore Girls. I love Gilmore Girls, and I was so happy when I saw that this book was coming out. I listened to it on audiobook. I love listening to memoirs on audiobooks because I love having people just read and tell me about their lives in their own voices. But this book was so incredible that I knew I wanted to own a copy so I could go back and reread it and kind of highlight and tab parts. I feel like this book is just so full of wisdom. I learned so much about Kelly Bishop and the life that she has lived. She's very unapologetic about the decisions that she's made and why she's made those decisions. She is full of wisdom and advice, and I think just really trusting in the universe or fate or whatever it is, kind of belief system that you have to guide her to where she needs to be and to allow her to take those risks or those opportunities that she wants to in life. I just loved this book so much. I think about it all the time, and I just adore Kelly Bishop. I just want to be Kelly Bishop when I grow up. I want to have coffee with her and talk to her more about her life. I don't know. I really love this one and I highly recommend it. Next, I have Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I love Emily Henry, and I feel like this book just really solidified her as a favorite author. This is a little bit more literary leaning than some of her other books, and I know that there were a lot of really mixed opinions on this, but personally, I loved it so much. It tells the story of two writers. So they have been recruited by Margaret Ives, I believe was her last name, who was a famous socialite, like very paparazzi driven, just lived a very on camera, on screen kind of life, and disappeared from the public eye. So now she wants this biography published about her life. So she's recruited two writers, and their names are, I can't remember, Alice and Hayden. So she's recruited Alice and Hayden, and she is giving both of them different parts of her life. So she's interviewing them like 3 times a week, one day, one the other, and telling them different parts of her life. They are going to write based upon what she's told them, and then she's going to pick one of them to publish her biography. And of course, Alice and Hayden have this kind of like rivalry, but they also fall in love, and it's just really beautiful. I feel like the story was woven really good. I love the story of Margaret and her past, but I was equally enthralled with the romance and the romantic pacing. Present day, I just really love this one. There's a little bit of twists and turns, which I personally didn't see coming, and I think part of that might have just been because I wasn't really expecting to see that in this type of book. But I loved this one, and again, it just really solidified why I love Emily Henry and why I will read anything and everything that she publishes. Last, I have the Saga of the Unfated by Danielle Jensen. So I have the first book, which is A Fate Inked in Blood, and then the second book, which is A Curse Carved in Bone. I feel like 2025 was the year that I started to fall out of love with romantasy. I felt really burnt out with it, and I felt that all the plot lines were very similar, and I was just kind of done with it. So I took a really, really long break through the bulk of the year and didn't read any books within this genre, and then decided to come back and read this one. So I loved it, and I now have so many new like romantasy books that I want to read this year. I'm only really going to talk about A Fate Inked in Blood just because I don't want to spoil anything. But this is a magic system set within the Viking culture. So kind of your typical Viking gods can bestow a drop of their blood onto certain children during conception, and then these children grow up to have special powers. So our main character, Freya, has the power of Heal, which is the power of protection. And when she was born, a prophecy was made that the child who had a drop of Heal's blood could be used to unite the lands under one king. So her family really wanted her to keep it quiet so she wouldn't be used to do men's bidding, and she could be safe. As Freya grows up, a circumstance happens, and she's forced to reveal her magic, and she is ushered by the Jarl of her community to unite the lands under him as king. When she gets there, the Jarl's son Bjorn is used to kind of help her kind of understand the ropes, teach her how to fight, things like that. Obviously, there's a budding romance. I think the slow burn in this was absolutely perfect. It was one of the best slow burns that I've ever read. I loved Bjorn and their relationship and the way that it was woven. The magic system was really amazing, and overall the plot was really good. But this book was just amazing. And then when I did start A Curse Carved in Bone, like I said, I won't really go into the plot of this one, but I read the bulk of this book within one night because I couldn't stop. Like every other chapter, I was just shocked and enthralled and just had to keep going, had to keep going. It was so good. So I feel like Danielle L. Jensen really brought me back into romantasy this year. I ordered her, I think it's Bridge Kingdom. I ordered that with the Barnes & Noble sale, so we'll definitely be reading more from her in the upcoming year. Alright friends, that sums up the books that I really loved, or a handful of the books that I really loved in 2025. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me babble on about books. If you love all things bookish and cozy, then I hope that you'll stick around because I'd love to have you here. But until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.